Hi everyone and welcome to this BrightTALK at Summit. I'm Anthony Heaton from BrightTALK and today I'm at the AWS Summit at the XL in London. I'm a last minute stand-in for the Moderator's front, but today we are going to be discussing the future of cloud applications in a hybrid world, and I'll be deferring to my colleagues here to lead the conversation. Guys, you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. My name's Chris Harvey. I'm lead architect for EMEA and for Scality.
My name's Chris Priest. I'm a senior consultant at Amido, and Amido are a cloud-first consultancy based here in London.
Hi, Martin Warren. I'm the Cloud Solutions Manager for NetApp in EMEA.
Brilliant. Good to meet you guys. And I think today we'll kick the first question off in how have we seen cloud applications change in the past couple of years, and what changes do you expect to see in the next 5 years?
Okay, do you want me to jump in on this one?
Yeah?
Okay. So I think what we're seeing is that applications need to be nearer the storage. So from a storage perspective, to give that efficiency. The other thing that we're seeing is the emergence of containers. And so I think containerization is going to be something that we're seeing a lot more of. Some of our partners are already offering services around that. The other thing is, I think from a storage perspective, the faster SSD disks, we're now delivering 30 terabyte disks. That helps because the throughput of the applications becomes much quicker. And with NVMe, it means that you can actually deliver that to where it really counts. So from a storage point of view, that's what I'm seeing.
So for us, from Amido's point of view, we see the shift has been starting with kind of lift and shift. We start in that kind of area where people just want to get stuff into the cloud. And now, as time moves forward, people are thinking more about actually using more of those managed services that are available, PaaS and SaaS kind of offerings. And they seem to be in that kind of area right now, and it seems to be in the future, people are talking more about using containers as well. So, Kubernetes seems to be the container orchestrator that's gained the most momentum. And people can see the benefits of density. You can actually reduce their costs. Now they're in the cloud, they're starting to leverage those cloud offerings. Let's start, bringing the cost down a little bit by using more of those resources, or using the resources more efficiently. Serverless is another trend as well that we're seeing. People want to move away from having any kind of resources to manage, and going towards full utility computing, which is quite exciting actually.
So look, you go back even a few years, cloud as we know it today didn't really exist, right? We all did the pretty clouds on whiteboards, but the existence of Amazon and Google and Azure, they didn't exist in the way they are today. So they came along, we now have singular cloud, then we've moved to hybrid cloud where we're really splitting application and storage and mixing them one way or the other, and there's a rapid movement towards multi-cloud. Where it goes beyond there, I don't know. I think what we are seeing as well is a bit of an evolution around the API set. To pay some homage to our hosts, they've bought a de facto standard in the form of S3, and that's allowing application developers to center around something. But that's also going to mean changes to how they develop application stacks, right? A RESTful interface versus an SMB mount or something. So I think where we've come from is very significant, and it's happened very quickly. Where we're going, I don't think we fully know yet. Yeah. I mean, it's a bright future out there, but it's very clear that cloud is here to stay. In some shape or form, cloud is here to stay.
From a technical point of view, when we're writing, as developers, when we're writing software, we want those standardizations.
Absolutely.
Actually, from a developer right up to CTO level, you want standardization. As a developer, you want to know that what you've written is going to actually stand the test of time. From a CTO point of view, you want to know that what you're investing in now is not going to be redundant in 4 years' time because everyone's moved away from it and you can't get support for it anymore. So this kind of standardization, I think, is really good for cloud. We've kind of been lots of different options, and now we're bringing things together a bit.
That's something we found with our data fabric. I mean, it's this idea that it shouldn't matter where the data is stored, where the application is located. You should be able to move that storage and have a connection between all those different points. It shouldn't matter whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-prem. The hybrid cloud, the multi-cloud piece it becomes a reality.
And typically, of course, in our industry, there's a RFC process that creates standards, but in this case, just the presence and the power of Amazon just created this standard, and the de facto standard is as good as any other standard, as long as everyone centers around it.
I mean, it's
absolutely
very widely used.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And just coming back to the lift and shift comment, I mean, I think what we're finding is that, as a storage company, we've been focused on that area, but we realize that developers don't really want to know all the nuances of storage. They just want to do what they need to do. Yep. But they do recognize they need to store it somewhere and they need to do it efficiently. So what we're doing is making that even easier. So that lift and shift, you can bring the data from the legacy systems into the cloud environment and actually work in one platform rather than have to go backwards and forwards between the two.
Yeah, as a developer, you want to have one API you work with, but it's, having to change shift around it's just a nightmare.
Brilliant. Just to encourage everyone dialing in and phoning in today to pose questions. We have some set, but your input greatly appreciated as always. So the second question I'd like to ask is, what does the future of data services look like for hybrid cloud platforms?
I can answer that from our point of view, data is more about databases, from the kind of work we do, and the big shift there that we've seen is that those guys that were doing kind of typical DBA roles, where you're kind of having to do backups and binary upgrades, this kind of stuff, they're now not having to do that kind of stuff. As soon as you start getting any kind of cloud involvement, all that undifferentiating heavy lifting just goes away, and you can start focusing on things that really, really matter. You kind of end up focusing on working with queries, making the data more accessible, making it faster to get to, this kind of stuff. So people seem a lot happier, because they're doing things that actually add more value, because AWS and Azure, they're taking all of that common stuff away from them.
Yeah, there's a heavy lift, right, in procuring hardware, getting it staged, justifying its existence, and if you can just say, hey, I've got a target system and it's kind of paid on a credit card almost, I can focus on the thing that I'm delivering, not how did I get there. So I think it's really changing the way people take projects to market.
So, from our point of view, we see data services as a really big thing. We've got a whole business unit just focused on data services, and that can be all sorts of things. It could be the protection of Office 365 or Salesforce or something like that. It's taking away that mundane task of having to manage all this yourself, and it broadens our appeal, obviously, to those people that are not into the nuances of storage, and that's really where we're coming from. But those services are being added all the time, and of course we work with AWS and other cloud vendors to layer on top of what they're offering.
Right. Yeah, and it's very clear that not all applications are suitable to run in the cloud, although that is constantly changing, and that circumference is ever getting bigger. But it is kind of interesting that Office 365 is one that people say, let's not run that. Let's not run an Exchange system ourselves. Why do we need that hassle to do that? We'll just pay for that.
And there's also that assumption it's all taken care of.
Yeah.
So the data center from the vendor or the supplier is absolutely resilient, no question. But what you do at the end user site, if you delete files and so forth, they will be deleted. The public cloud is not a charity in terms of storing things forever. So you need to take care of that, and that's an area that we see as quite a growing part of cloud services.
Essentially, it's kind of like any kind of scaling, or any business scaling. When you scale a business, you can do stuff cheaper. You can consolidate, and that's essentially, why would we want to run our own Exchange server? There's guys out there that are experts at doing this. They do it all the time, i.e. Microsoft. Why not let them do it? Just take away the hassle.
Yeah, and traditionally we sold software and hardware, but now we're selling services. Those services, yes, they're based on our software, but they're running natively inside the cloud. Mm-hmm. So you just pay on a subscription basis. So, for example, the point you raised, Chris, about sort of understanding what applications are going to be able to be moved to the cloud. First of all, you need to understand what you've got. What applications are connected to which storage. We have tools to do that. Now, we've made that available as a service that you can just sign up for for a period of time and then use it as and when on a consumption basis. That's where we see we're going.
Now one interesting thing to note though is that sometimes it's not always cheaper to do something in the cloud. You can actually show TCO where it's sometimes cheaper to do things on-prem.
Precisely.
But it becomes, the beauty of the fact that it's there means that you can make that decision. Do I want to spend my effort in running something locally for various architectural reasons or cost reasons, or do I want to put it in the cloud? And now the organizations have choice. And they can follow a bottom line choice or a skill choice, or they can follow an availability choice, or whatever, right? Whatever the matrix is.
But, that word choice is a wonderful thing, but you've got to make the right choice. You've got to make those decisions. And I think where we're all involved is helping customers understand what those choices are and kind of navigating them around those different options. And I think that's. We have there's a saying springs to mind: if the answer is cloud, what is the value?
So we have an internal or a comment that we quite often say is freedom control. You have freedom to do what you want to do, but there needs to be some control element in there too. I think we're probably going to touch on this in a little bit, but one of the things that occurs to me is all the time that you launched a service on-prem, there was natural inhibitors in place that would stop you from being excessive, right? You had to get sign-off from someone in management to go purchase the equipment. You purchased it in advance. Someone had to rack and stack it and get it stood up. With the elasticity and availability of the cloud, everything's now booked in arrears, so you can spend money without realizing you're spending it. And quite often, what you see is sort of rampant use of an environment because it's there and it's completely elastic, which is an amazing thing, but it comes with its own set of issues. So I think we need to, and I think there's a cottage industry in this, and you have some products in this as well, and we're certainly focusing on this, but this idea of freedom to do what you want to do, but add some elements of control around it so that you just can't go crazy and build a massive system that no one can actually pay for.
You're just building more complexity, aren't you, basically?
From a tech team point of view, that elasticity is amazing. It really you can. We talk about failing fast these days, and finding out what works and iterating, and the cloud gives us the ability to do that, and actually not having to book that server 6 weeks in advance is incredibly useful. But you're right. You have to also. There's a tension there between your costs going out of control, because otherwise you go, I want to do this thing, click a button, and you've got a resource, and then who's going to turn it off? Because nobody has the motivation to turn it off.
Bill arrives
the guy that pays the bill. Then he's like, oh, okay, maybe we should turn something off.
And we've certainly seen instances, I'm sure you have too, where you end up with resources running in the cloud, and everyone's pointing at everyone else saying, I thought that was yours. And they just sort of keep running. So there is definitely this, I think there is going to be a complete cottage industry around this concept of ensuring management oversight or control of what's running in the cloud. But at the end of the day, it's an amazing thing that, Elastic DB, we were talking earlier, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
I suppose the next question then would be, what do you think some of the key ways that you think tech teams can modernize their architectures?
So we talked about it already a little bit, but we'll touch back on it again, I think, is there will be, I think, we've seen a huge evolution in coding standards and coding libraries and other things, but I think we're also seeing an evolution in API sets. I think where traditionally people looked to see things as files, they're now there's a recognition of this object world, and things can be seen as objects. And what also comes with that object recognition often, not always, often, is a RESTful access instead of a file-based access. So I think what development teams need to be thinking about doing is, how can I take my application, which today considers everything as a file or a mount point or something, and how can I move that to a more RESTful interface? Because what comes with that is absolute scalability. You're not beholden then to sort of a single server that's got a mount point on it or something, right? You can go broad, and and this is why I was saying, we mentioned it earlier, with the advent of S3 as an API, you have your perfect vehicle to do this, but it is going to require recoding, and I think you're kind of in the perfect position to comment on that.
Yeah, and it's really easy to come at this stuff and say, well, we just need to change everything because now we're going into the cloud, and actually the right way that we found is to try and carve out small chunks of your architecture, small chunks of your systems, and say, okay, well, now maybe there's a particular data store that's associated with a particular application, maybe we can put that data store in the cloud and that application in the cloud, and let's get that into production, and then let's see how it goes. Let's get some feedback. Let's see what how everyone, what the experience was, and then feed that back and do the next chunk. And that is what we found is the way to do it. And actually, our clients, we've got a huge global retailer as a client, and they are, they still have a lot of stuff on-prem, but they're taking this incremental approach over a period of years where they're, sometimes lifting and shifting and then replatforming. So getting the stuff in the cloud in the first place, a microservice, and then saying, okay, well now we're in there, what can we use? Let's use Cosmos, or let's use table storage, and then make the system more scalable.
And I think that's borne out by our experience with customers as well. They, look at a department, look at a section. Don't try and boil the ocean in one go. But finding out what's on-prem often is a surprise. What storage is connected with which applications? Are those applications being used, and by whom? And what is their, are they legacy applications? Will they move to the cloud? Should they move to the cloud? Because some things probably shouldn't be in the cloud, and some things from a compliancy point of view, you may want some on-prem. So it's really down to the choice that we talked about. It's about that control.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan and always have been of the crawl, walk, run philosophy of life. So as you said, pick something you can put your arms around and test it with that, move with that, before you go, let's move everything to the cloud and just go big bang, right? Crawl, walk, run, faster you go. And then also another principle I also love is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Pick the simplest app, the one that, not the one the business relies on as your first app. don't go with the order processing system as your first app. So move slowly, but recognize that there are new ways of doing things, right? New standards and they are they might be de facto, but they're standards nevertheless.
Yeah, there's a lot of maturity out there already that people don't necessarily realize in terms of those standards. And to echo your point, we see that the payment systems, the ones that are the most critical, are the ones that go last, because people want to learn all the lessons, right? So it makes absolutely, the first stuff that goes out there is the things that may not be on the customer journey, the back office processing, which often actually, often when you're processing a huge amount of data, that often on-prem is quite expensive anyway. Getting that in the cloud, you get a lot more flexibility.
Another thing that we were talking about earlier is you can talk to a customer and say, are you cloud aware? And quite often they'll say, no, we don't use the cloud. And you say, well, do you use Office 365? Oh yeah, we use Office 365. Do you use Gmail? Oh yeah, we use Gmail. Salesforce.com. Yeah, we use Salesforce. Okay, you're quite a lot in the cloud then. You're not missing. You haven't missed it. You just missed that you're doing it.
Yeah. Equally, actually, we've seen some people say that they think they're in the cloud, and actually they've got a supplier who's got their stuff on-prem. So they feel they're in the cloud, but actually they're not really aware of what that really means. It almost seems that if they can't see the kit, then actually they feel that they are safe.
Yes.
And actually that isn't, sometimes isn't the case. A lot of time it is, but actually, sometimes you kind of dig in and say, okay, where actually is your stuff running? Is it actually running in the cloud somewhere?
On top of all that, you've then got the little thing of GDPR and regulations and so forth, which bring its own challenges to all of this, and understanding where your data lives is never been more important.
And it's quite stunning how many industries are maybe quite rightly going last, but nearly all industries are going. GDPR is obviously a big concern. You have early adopters, middle adopters, and then late runners, right? And so the banking industry is typically seen as sort of non-cloud. Defense and science and military and stuff would naturally seen as slow adopters, but they are also moving that way too. What Scality does is enable people to have on-prem cloud. So we're in this too. This ability to give customers a choice of having a cloud experience on-prem when they want to put a border around the data, or move stuff into the cloud. And cloud control, which is something we're going to be really coming hard on this year, is important. This ability to just slingshot data at something that can, by policy, can put it all over the cloud. And all of these technologies, you're going to start to see all of this come. I think this is the era of the multi-cloud. It's now. It's absolutely now, and we're going to see a massive uptake of this.
But using multi-cloud brings some challenges as well, getting
Absolutely.
the best out of the multi-cloud.
Absolutely.
And really what you want is automation between those clouds so that you set parameters to say, if my data, if the price, for instance, raises by 10%, move that data to another platform or whatever. But
and humans
you don't want to do that manually.
Humans aren't, exactly. Humans aren't engaged enough to be able to make those decisions. You need policy to do that, right?
Exactly.
So this is an era of it. So the application developers need to be aware of this.
And where do MSPs come into play for a successful cloud strategy?
So I think when we think about clouds, we traditionally think of the big three. But I think what we're starting to see as well is telco kind of MSPs engage, and they bring their own significant value set that is slightly different. I know we were talking a while ago about kind of near cloud experience, where because these MSPs typically have their network companies, so they bring high-speed networking, they can potentially bring up a point of presence somewhere closer to the customer and provide a better cloud-like experience based on network speeds or latency or distance. And I think what we're starting to see is MSPs sort of say, we can be a cloud provider too. It doesn't just have to be the big three, homage to Amazon where we are today, of course, but they can also compete, and I think they bring another set of attributes into that equation.
Totally agree. I mean, we've got about 300 partners, independent service providers, many of them are telcos. And I think they differentiate themselves from, and they're often using AWS and Azure and stuff as in the background, but they're merging those. And I think the smarter ones have learnt to do that rather than try and compete, because that's not really what we're talking about.
But for us, our customers tend to want to stick with the big three. They tend to want to, and actually, to a certain extent, they tend to already have one of the big three vendors they want to be in, and they don't really want to deviate too much. I think it's for whatever reason they, once they're in there, it can be easier to kind of to stay in that same ecosystem, and actually kind of branching out can be tricky. But I guess also, typically for us, or at least the kind of people we work with, it tends to be that availability is key, reliability, and I wonder, I guess for them, they might feel slightly less confident in the ability of a kind of smaller provider to give that kind of level of availability.
I think, that's a really good point, but if those 300 service providers were all using the same software, and there was commonality between them, and you could move your data from one of those companies to AWS or backwards and forwards, then that's where we're at.
The API discussion, right? If a Verizon or an AT&T or a British Telecom or whoever of this world offer these APIs, then they can look very similar to the traditional cloud providers.
But they're adding some other localization or some other service on top.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Now, when it comes to moving your applications into the cloud, it's a life cycle project, right? It takes time to do this. It's months and months usually. So you can sort of see the natural reticence to change because setting the agreements up, getting all the T's and C's in place, actually doing the data evolution is time to time. So they're not going to want to shift. I think what we're going to see is tools that allow the shifting of data to happen sort of either in band or out of band, but behind the scenes. Yeah. So I am primarily talking to, I'm using Amazon's S3 protocol to put stuff into AWS Amazon, and I've stuck to that protocol. But actually, I can see it's cheaper in Azure or Google or somewhere else, or there's some other facet that you're being offered a special because you've got Office 365 or something. So I want to pivot my data. I want to do it in both. And I think that multi-cloud, that ability to bifurcate or multicate data in different paths, I think is something that's coming.
And also, if you introduce object storage on-prem, you can create your own kind of cloud environment. Yeah. So, that's something that some of our customers and also partners are looking to do as well. And then, of course, if you want to, you can then export that data to AWS or Azure or whatever as a long-term archive.
Now, there is a little bit of a Hotel California-ish proposition with Amazon. Getting the data back out can be more expensive than just hosting it. So I think what you might see a bifurcation of data to two places at the same time, because I might want to switch, but instead of moving it, I'll just delete it and leave it in situ somewhere else. So this is interesting. I think this is going to be some major changes coming.
And you mentioned near the cloud. I mean, some customers who are just, maybe they're a pharmaceutical company, they've got very high IP, it's got huge value, they want to use the cloud, but they're a bit nervous about the data side of it. So, if you could provide a way to store the data next to the cloud in maybe the same co-located premises, and then you're getting all the efficiencies and all the agility of the cloud compute, but your storage is not actually in the cloud, it's next to it.
So do you think those fears around public cloud are founded, or are they? So if you look at the history,
they're a gut feel.
Yeah, it's interesting,
particularly here in the UK. I talk to lots of people, and they go, "Yeah, I know it should be all right, but I just don't really, I don't trust it. There's something I don't want to be the guy that signs the piece of paper." There is a bit of that.
But there does seem to be a tendency towards people realising that it's actually okay, and I guess as more time passes and there are less incidents to do with the big three and more incidents to do with other people, I guess that attitude can shift.
Well, 2 years ago, I think it was, the FSA came out with a paper that said to financial institutions, it's okay to use the cloud.
All right.
And you have the existence of GovCloud and other ones now that are specifically dedicated to those. But I've certainly been in enough conversations where people will say, our lawyers need to know when we put a piece of data on this, which disk is it on?
Yeah.
Which is impossible in an object storage environment, or more or less impossible. So then to say, we'll throw it in the cloud and it's somewhere in the Ireland region or it's somewhere in London, we're not quite sure. The lawyers kind of have an absolute keel over. Anyway, so yeah, I think
and then
that
you confound it all by saying that there is no such thing as the cloud.
No such thing, yeah.
The cloud doesn't really exist.
Yes. The other thing that I'm seeing as well is customers of mine that they recognize the cloud is nice for its elasticity. They primarily want to be on-prem, but they have this need to burst.
Yes.
So media companies, for instance, might have an on-prem CDN, but they're going to host the World Cup or something, and they just know that they can't deal with that. So they want to sort of temporarily burst into the cloud. And I think that's another reason that cloud take-up happens, because people they elastically burst in and come back out again and use those pre-existing agreements that they had.
Yeah, something like Red Nose Day springs to mind as well. Because the amount of equipment that these guys used to have to bring on site just to cope with that day, and even then they often underestimated what they needed. Now it's everything. It's just elastic. You can take as much as you need. It's
So for us in the retail side, Black Friday is the big one of the year. And actually, where I was at Black Friday last year, the Thursday before reached 30% more than the peak traffic of the previous year. So
you knew there was a tidal wave coming, or a tsunami.
We did, and actually we had 24 hours to say, okay, well, can we go 30% higher than today, which is again 30% higher than we thought we were going to have to go, and can we test that in 24 hours and be confident that we're going to meet the needs of our customers, and we can, and we did, but because with cloud that's possible. And can you imagine 5-10 years ago say, well, let's buy some servers in 24 hours?
Well, exactly, yeah. Can you imagine that conversation to your hardware vendor? Can you ship something and get it racked by next Wednesday?
It wouldn't really work.
Stuck on the M4.
Yeah, and then when you're done, you just turn it all down again and spend less money. Yeah. It's a great place to be. I think it's still taking people by surprise how much of a shift there is to online stuff. People in the 20s, they're just doing everything online.
Yes.
They're buying stuff online, they're meeting with their friends online, and this is all putting more and more, sometimes unexpectedly, a strain on these services. So we need to be able to react to those.
And then you've got IoT and driverless cars and all this kind of, all these other things that are going to grow that amount of data even more so. And, I think we're just sort of seeing the start of all of this.
I'm in my 20s and I do everything online.
So Cisco said that 80% of all web traffic will be streaming content by 2020. So we're seeing a huge spike across. So it's really interesting. I think the next question, I naturally urge the audience to post any questions if they have any. I'd like to ask you why a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for hybrid cloud platforms.
Well, I think we actually already talked about this, right? So don't throw everything up. Crawl, walk, run. Pick the least invasive to your core business to do first. Not everything goes in the cloud. Not everything, and that would include a private cloud. I mean, not everything is suited to that. But I do think the combination of private on-prem cloud nearline cloud and true cloud, you can cover nearly everything that your business requires. And then of course there's procured cloud services like Salesforce.com to do things that AWS and others don't do. So I think you can pretty much do everything, but you have to be very specific, I think, and start slow.
Whatever you do, start with renting, then try buying, and then as a last resort, build it yourself, right? You want to, there's no point in building it if you can buy it, there's no point in buying it if you can rent it. And that's more the case now than I think it has been in a long time. Again, years ago, your only choice was to build it, and now pretty much whatever you need to do, there's someone else out there who's done it for you and is offering it as a service.
Yeah, I think that's very true. For me, it comes down to understanding what you've got and analysing the true value of what you're going to get from putting something in the cloud or not putting it in the cloud. Understanding what the value of that application is or that business initiative. That's sometimes overlooked. So technology gets in the way of sometimes the fundamental reasons why you want to do something as a business. So I think that's important. And really, coming to the points you both mentioned, I think entirely valid in terms of, one size definitely doesn't fit all. We see some customers who are 75% in the cloud, they may even end up 100% in the cloud. We've got other customers that will be 50-50. They may want to change their mind as well. And that's an important thing, because if you've gone down a certain route, you don't want to be locked into that strategy. What if in 2 years' time the cloud didn't provide you what you thought it was going to provide you, or it was better than? You might want to change that dial between what's on-prem and what's in the cloud. So you need to be able to change direction if you need to. So
one thing's absolutely given, right? It's as big as AWS and Google and Azure and all the others are. There's always new players on the block. Always. They will come with new ideas, they'll come with new tooling, they'll fit a niche, that niche might expand into something more generic, but there'll be new players, and you have to watch for those. They can bring value that you don't otherwise see.
Yeah. Interestingly, almost as a counterpoint, we've certainly seen that sometimes people can try and do too much abstraction. So I think for data it's sort of different because it's quite a mature area.
It's lasting as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Stays forever.
Exactly. But let's say there's a new thing coming along, the new technology, and someone says, okay, well, we don't know whether Azure might release their offering next year, and that might be we might want to switch to that. So let's build an abstraction layer in between our application and these services, such that we can easily switch later on. So that seems like a great idea. But then you often end up putting a load of effort into building that abstraction layer, only to compromise the delivery of the thing you want to get out the door. When actually getting out the door earlier, learning earlier, might mean that you save more time overall. So I mean, it depends on your scenario. Obviously, the classic consultant's answer: it depends.
How much money you got?
but also, it just you can be in some scenarios where actually. You don't want to have the option. You actually want to lock in. You want to look into one thing because it's going to be cheaper to get there.
But then again, it comes back to that taking little bite-sized chunks.
That too. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I suppose the final question I had today, guys, was I think we may have touched on it slightly, but we've spoken a lot about a multi-cloud approach, and really what that will mean for enterprise applications.
Freedom and control instead of before. I think with multi-cloud, you're going to have the ability to have on-prem, which is obviously something we provide. You're going to have near cloud, which is also something we can provide by selling to MSPs, and then you can have cloud, all enabled by standards. But I think multi-cloud is the next generation. I think it's what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think where there is a future emerging is the orchestration between those multi-clouds. So it's helping you automating that process. So the multi-cloud gives you there could be cost differentials, there could be performance differentials between, or you may just not want to put all your eggs in one basket. So I think multi-cloud is definitely the way that people are layering multi-cloud on top of hybrid cloud. For a lot of companies, they've evolved through hybrid cloud, but it's it wasn't a conscious decision, it wasn't the way things were architected ground up. Multi-cloud tends to be more of a deliberate action. You design your system around multiple clouds, but you then need some tools to help you manage those multiple clouds, because that could become quite a task if you don't automate the process.
I think there's going to be a cottage industry in that management and control.
I agree with you.
I think that's going to happen.
I think I talked about abstraction just now, and I guess data is a very common problem to solve, and compute is the other one.
Yeah.
And containers are this amazing way that you can target one particular platform and then move it around.
Exactly.
And that containers have been around for a little while, and you've been able to write Java applications on and Python and Node, JavaScript, but of course Microsoft has moved into this area now with .NET Core, and that opens up a whole swathe of developers that use this kind of .NET Microsoft ecosystem. They can now target containers, and they can run on Kubernetes, they can run on Docker, they can run on AWS, and it, in theory, moving those containers around is as easy as just targeting another endpoint. So that's a big evolution. That really allows us to say, okay, well we're going to target containers, we're going to target Linux with our whatever we're building, and then we can put it in Azure, and then if it turns out that AWS is cheaper, we should be able to move it across with relative ease.
It sort of comes back to that earlier point about the objects, doesn't it? You treat it as a piece. It's got it's got the application, it's got the storage, it's got everything all connected, and you can literally then move it from one place to the other very, very quickly. We've got plugins to Docker and Kubernetes, and that's really where we see a lot of development going.
And Microsoft want to promote this as well. It's funny how Microsoft has shifted.
Yes.
They from being entirely proprietary to being almost entirely open source now, and embracing Kubernetes. They're actually we talk to them a lot. They want to see more use of AKS, the Kubernetes offering. They're encouraging us to get out there and talk to our customers about it, and it makes sense. It's and that's certainly where I mentioned it earlier on. But with containers, that's where everybody seems to be consolidating, and actually once you build up some momentum, everyone jumps on that bandwagon, and everyone's using Kubernetes. I think also what's interesting with containers is that it's one of those rare things where the developer and the CTO, they both see the benefits. The developer wants to write his code and test it on his laptop or whatever, and then deploy exactly what he's built into the cloud. And the CTO is going, great, I can now utilize my resources much more efficiently. And so everyone gets it. Usually with a new tech, there's a CTO saying, we should do this, and everyone's like, I don't know. Or the dev's going, this is a great new technology, but the CTO is going, I don't really know. So that's quite interesting to see.
The kids coming out of college have got more new ideas than the old dogs like us. So as someone in my late 20s, early 30s, it's interesting sort of seeing where we've come from, right? When going back a very long time ago, you had kind of mainframes, then you had shared services on mainframes, then the client server evolution, and then sort of fast forward a few years, you start getting client applications. The iPhone obviously was a complete change of everything, changed everything, tablets, etc., and you really truly move into client server apps. Then you got the emergence of the cloud, then you've got the hybrid cloud, and interestingly the cloud and the hybrid cloud and the multi-cloud are actually a throwback to shared time on a mainframe, so we're sort of coming full circle here. And all these new coding ideas, the emergence of Kubernetes, or Docker Swarm and Kubernetes, the GitHub kind of generation of the world, the ability to share code and get code and make things open source, make things readily available, all of this ecosphere has become incredibly rich, very confusing, but incredibly rich, and we sort of come this massive evolution from sort of shared mainframe services into full-on elastic capabilities within cloud.
And as a 20-year-old myself, I sort of look back to those times. But I think the one thing that's different with cloud is just that speed, that agility. I mean, that has never been before. So I think we can all sort of liken it to things that have gone before, because in essence there's a job to be done, there's different tools to do it. But never before have we seen that ability to be able to be up and running tomorrow with a new idea. We could come up with something today and tomorrow we can be in business. I think that's incredible.
What's for sure is it doesn't stop here. It's gonna keep going.
If I could have maybe a final thought for the end of the day as we wrap up, any words of wisdom you'd like to bestow on our audience today?
Keep pushing.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think the whole rent is better than buy is better than build. That for me is the key thing to think about when going into cloud is getting that in the right order.
Shouldn't matter where the data's stored, you still need to manage it and control it.
Absolutely, management and control.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today.